The first historical mention of Jerusalem is in the Bible, in the era of the patriarchs. King David declares Jerusalem as Israel's capital, known from that point on also as Zion. His son King Solomon builds the first temple. But the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians, and the Jews are exiled. King Cyrus's declaration enables the Jews to return and rebuild the temple. Alexander the Great's conquests include Jerusalem. However, his successors desecrate the temple, which leads to the Maccabees' revolt against the Greeks' imposition of Hellenism. The Roman Empire seizes control, and King Herod renovates the temple. A large-scale revolt against a corrupt and vicious Roman reign fails. The Second Temple is destroyed, and the Jews are banned from Jerusalem. 60 years pass, and Bar Kokhba leads another revolt for the freedom of Jerusalem. But it fails after 3 years of battle. Jews are banned from the city, renamed by the Romans Aelia Capitolina, in order to eradicate its Jewish heritage. Roman Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity and reinforces the ban on Jews entering Jerusalem. A new religion, Islam, sweeps through the Middle East. Non-Muslims are declared second-class citizens. Crusaders conquer Jerusalem in a bloodbath of Jews and Muslims. 2,000 Jews are burnt alive in the main synagogue, and the city is depopulated of its previous inhabitants. The first organized mass Jewish return arrives from France and England. The Mamluks defeat the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem, and building and renovating of synagogues and churches is banned. The great Mishnai commentator Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura settles in Jerusalem. The Ottoman Empire takes over, imposing restrictions on Jews and Christians, and Sultan Suleiman rebuilds the walls. But as the empire declines, Jerusalem is badly neglected. Still, the Jewish people stream back, build new neighborhoods, and re-establish their majority by 1863. World War I breaks out. The Ottoman Empire collapses and makes room for a new Middle East. The British Foreign Secretary, Arthur James Balfour, declares the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. Britain receives a mandate to create a Jewish homeland, but forbids Jews from blowing the shofar or reading holy scrolls at the Western Wall. Thousands of Muslims are incited to unleash an attack against Jews in Jerusalem and Hebron. 86 Jews are brutally murdered, hundreds are wounded. UN Resolution 181 declares Jerusalem as a corpus separatum, a separate entity. A Jewish state is declared as Jerusalem is put under siege, conquered, and divided. 58 synagogues are destroyed or desecrated. Harsh limitations are imposed on Jews and Christians for 19 years. The Six-Day War. Jerusalem is reunited and freedom and equality are restored. Throughout history, only Israel has protected the freedom of all peoples and faiths in Jerusalem.
Welcome to Decision Point. Today we're going to continue our discussion about the fate of Israel. Very soon now, the UN is going to be voting on the establishment of a Palestinian state right next to Israel. There's a lot of speculation about what that is going to mean and how it will impact the Jewish people, as well as a lot of prophecy around the establishment of the Palestinian state. So today we have with us our guests who are going to help us to understand a little bit more about this issue. We have Pastor Jack Berg from Sun Valley Baptist Church. Welcome, Pastor.
Thank you.
And we also have Mary Lou Smith, who is currently the Islamic Awareness Education Coordinator for the Southwest region of Aglow International. Thank you for being here with us, Mary Lou.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay, great. Last time we talked a little bit about the importance of the negotiations of the borders for Israel, that is really a very important issue. The question I have today is we know that Israel did exist thousands of years ago, but was there ever a country of Palestine?
Not an Arab country of Palestine. There was a country of Philistia, which of course were probably come from Greek, either Crete or Greek, and they were there as enemies of Israel.
So the Philistines of the Bible and the Palestinians are not the same people?
They're not the same people whatsoever, and the name Palestine actually is the Latin word for Philistine, and it was put on the land by Hadrian after the Second Jewish Revolt in 135 AD. And it was done as a slur. It was done to get rid of the Jewish people. But there has never been an Arab nation called Palestine, and this was done in the 1960s to give legitimacy to the terrorist group headed by Yasser Arafat.
Now, we don't understand really, as Christians, I don't think we really understand that the Jewish people are not of one mind about what should be happening with regard to the establishment of Palestine or even the Jewish nation of Israel. So can you help us to understand that, what their perspective is a little bit, the Jewish people?
Well, they're a democracy, the only democracy in that region. And so that alone would destabilize the area.
So the Israel is the only democracy in the region, is what you're saying. Yeah. And so that they want to get, the Arab nations aren't real happy about that? Or
if you've seen any of the signs from, especially in Britain, it says on those signs, democracy, go to hell. And that is pretty much of an Islamic look at democracy, because there is no democracy in Islam, cannot be. But I think what you said before is significant, because many of the secular Jews, those who do not necessarily hold to any spiritual relationship with God, but just as a racial tie to the nation of Israel, are very much in favor, of course, Israel. But some of the Orthodox Jews don't even believe there should be a state of Israel. They're waiting for the Messiah to come and set it up.
So either way, the secular Jews who are in Israel, who are the vast majority of the Jewish people, don't look at Islam, the Islamic faith, as a threat in the same way that we do as Christians. Is that accurate to say, or maybe I'm wrong?
Well, I think most of them today view it as a threat, but they're not concerned because the Messiah is going to take care of it. Mm-hmm. But they don't look at it from the prophetic standpoint that we do as Christians.
And many of them live side by side with Palestinians that have been their friends for years and years, so you know, they have many sympathies towards them. So
as an integrated society, just as we may have Muslim neighbors living next to us, they don't see the Muslim religion as a threat. And perhaps even from a neighbor-to-neighbor perspective, it's not. So why is the Muslim religion a threat to Israel then? Why is it a threat?
Like he was saying, they don't believe our culture. They believe our culture is evil, and so they want to replace it with.
So
and again, this goes back to what we talked about last time, is that Islam controls every aspect of the culture, and there is no freedom within Islam, so there's no room for Christianity. Except as a subjugated people, there is no room for a Jew except as a subjugated people. And Jews are looked at, frankly, as monkeys and, you know, and Pigs.
So where did the words monkey and pig come from?
They come from the Quran itself.
So if I looked that up in the Quran, I would find
find
Jews
it.
referred to as monkeys and pigs.
Yes.
In your visits to Israel, which both of you have been numerous times, what have you seen about the Jewish people's perspective about establishing this state of Palestine?
I don't know that I've really, interacted with enough of them to know their perspective on that. I know they'd like to live in peace,
So
and they can't afford to give up much more land. They've already given much that God said was theirs.
So you were talking about the whole view of trying to avoid persecution, perhaps.
Well, yeah, they look at it from a standpoint that they are looking for a place that they can live in peace. Many of the Jews today, though, have reached a point where they're just simply tired. They're very bitter. They're tired of their constant being at war. You know, we retire our military at 20 plus years. Some of their men will have been in the military up until they're 55 or 60. Some of their women will also have been in the military that long. And they really wish to, as we talked about a little bit before, the secular part of Israel is set up to avoid persecution. Many of the Jews have come in from Russia. We wonder sometimes why so many of them are involved in liberal causes, or they're involved in the liberal media. And because they see this as being secular, they look at it as being a non-threat to a religious group. Of course, it didn't work that way in Russia. They looked at it initially in Germany that way. And you know, the whole, what we're seeing in the world today really does see a precedent in what occurred in Europe in the 1930s.
So when the Nazis took over, the Jews did not view that as a threat initially.
Not initially. It was really looked at as, in fact, many of them were actually supportive because he returned the economy and so forth. That didn't last very long, you know, in Nazi Germany before it went the other way. But the idea that we're looking at what we're seeing with the Muslim religion and we're ignoring the danger to it is exactly the same thing as occurred in the 30s when we ignored the danger of Hitler. He said exactly what he was going to do, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Do you think that most Israelis take the threats of some of the Arab nations, for example, Iran, seriously? Do they, or
Today, yes.
today they do, but
Yes.
did they have, is that a new thing, or is that something which is,
I think some of them have all along, but many of them, they're just like Americans. If I don't have to worry about it and I can put it in the background, I'm not going to worry about it. But it's reached a point where it's no longer in the background for them.
Right.
It's in their backyard.
right? So just as Hitler was very clear about what he was going to do and what he was about, in the same way the Muslim religion, particularly radical Muslim states like Iran, are very clear about what they want to do with Israel. So
That's right.
how have they said what they want to do with Israel? What have they communicated?
Numerous ones of their leaders have come out with statements of what they intend to do, and it's like Pastor Berg was saying, there is something called taqiyya in Islam that allows them to interpret it for the Americans one way, and
So
for
the word is taqiyya?
taqiyya means it's okay if you lie in the cause of Islam, if it's to further Islam.
So we would be told one thing, and
At times,
Oh, you see it, and that's where an Arab-speaking Christian has a tremendous advantage because he's able to translate the Arabic, whereas we listen to what's being said and we really don't understand what he's saying. And whether it's been Yasser Arafat or many other leaders in the Arab world, they've been very up front. The nation of Israel is to be destroyed. In fact, they have a saying, first comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. And what they're saying is first the Jews and then the Christians. And it is a tenet of Islam that we must be at least relegated to subservience.
At least relegated to subservient status, and if not, eradicated.
Right.
What do other Arab nations think about the Palestinians, and both historically and how they're behaving in the present?
Well, I think that going back, you have what's called Black Friday among the Palestinians. In that particular case, King Hussein in September, and I think the year was 1969, killed almost 30,000 of them in the mosques on a Friday.
The Palestinians?
The Palestinians, and realized that Jordan was originally the Palestinian state. They have done nothing to take the Palestinian refugees that were not run out of Israel. Please, they were not. The Israeli government did not run them out. They invited them to stay. Many of them left, and some of them for good reason. They were trying to avoid the conflict that they knew was coming on. They've done nothing to integrate them into their society. Is it not possible that Saudi Arabia, with the immense amount of money that she has, could not have built camps and so forth, and hospitals and schools for the Palestinians in Gaza and on the West Bank? She's done nothing. No Arab state, no Muslim state has done anything to help the Palestinians because they want them to be a source of contention against the Jewish state.
So the Palestinians are being used as pawns in a bigger game. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
And be real careful. I think we're using a word here, Palestinian, which again really doesn't exist.
So who are the Palestinian people, really?
They're really Palestinian people are they could have been people who were there originally. I met a man, very fine man, very sweet couple in Jerusalem. Last time we were there, he's the leader of the Sufi community in Jerusalem. Invited us into their home. We spent several hours together. He's been there for over 800 years. His family has been. There are many others that came in because the Jews developed a tremendous viable economy in the 1890s to 1920, 1930, and many of them came in there to work. Then later, because the economy was good in Israel, there were jobs. So they did immigrate and come on in. The Jews bought the land from Turkish landholders in the 1870s and on, and the Turkish landholders willingly sold them that land. They developed it. It was empty. It was empty. In fact, Mark Twain was there in the 1860s and said it was empty. There was nothing there.
So all that has been built
It's been built by the Jews,
by the
Israelis.
Israelis.
They literally made the desert bloom. They furnish a lot of fruits and vegetables and things for the rest of the world.
By keeping the Palestinians oppressed, unhappy, in poverty, or unstable, then the rest of the Arab nations who want to see Israel gone, not existing, they are basically using the Palestinian issue as a wedge, as a weapon against Israel. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Can I make a comparison?
Sure.
The area that Israel now occupies is not much larger than El Paso County. That's, it's really kind of makes it.
Kind of looks like El Paso County too.
Well, some of it. But it's not an area that's much larger than El Paso County. And so when you divide that between those two nations, and they're at war, you can see that it's so close, so tight. I think also from a Christian perspective or a prophetic perspective, isn't it interesting, a land that's so small and seemingly so insignificant controls the fate of the world and could not unless God has had a hand in it all along.
It is amazing to think of a piece of land that small, really with so few resources in it, there isn't even any oil in it to speak of, has become a huge bone of contention for the entire world. And that is certainly the work of God. So when you look at the issue of peace in Israel, how do the secular Jews think that peace will actually come about? And talked about a couple of different people that you talked with, and I know you've talked with people in Israel as well, Mary Lou. So you were talking with the bus driver who was Palestinian, I think it was.
No, actually, he's Jewish.
Jewish, uh-huh.
And he was a fairly Orthodox Jew. Mm-hmm. And what he was looking for and what I was reading from was Ezekiel 38 and 39. And he was relating to me his view of those passages, and they're the same as a biblical Christian's going to come up with, that this is an invasion of Israel, and it comes at the time of the Messiah. The difference being, I kept saying his return, and he was saying his coming.
So that's the critical difference between the Orthodox Jew and the Christian.
Christian is
one sees it as Christ's return, and the other sees it as the Messiah's coming, right?
Yes.
First coming.
First coming.
Right.
But it is still, and there's your answer to peace.
That's how they think peace will be established.
Yeah, the secular Jew, of course, is going to do it just like we're always trying to do it. They want to negotiate it.
They think it can be negotiated.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, how do you think the Jews feel about being chosen, the chosen people? Do they see themselves as the chosen people?
I think innately they know they have a calling from God, even if they don't practice the religious life. I'm not sure they understand all the implications of it. I'm not sure I would either, but
I think, what they've said to me was, so big deal to be chosen for the ovens, to be chosen for persecution, to be chosen for disbursement. So many of them are bitter, but Mary Lou's absolutely right. Innately, they know inside of them that God's got special purpose.
So even though they know that they're chosen, they may not view it as a blessing.
Right.
Absolutely not. How should we be praying for Israel, given the situation that it is now?
well, only God can change mindsets and hearts that are set on wrong things. So we pray every Monday night for that area, for God to have His way, to reach the hearts and minds of people with truth, and for protection for everyone.
So Women's Aglow is actually praying for the nation of Israel and the Middle East, the Islamic nations, the Islamic people,
Yes.
every week.
Right. We have a conference call, sometimes over 100 people internationally praying.
For Israel and the Middle East. Pastor, from your perspective?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, I think we need to remember that even though in the political side they are our enemies, we've been in that conflict for 10 years, since 9/11. But from the spiritual end of it, they need to be one. God's doing a great work in the Middle
Yes,
East.
He is.
He's doing a great work in the Middle East. We just don't see it. And we need to, be very much in prayer. And we need to be in prayer for the Jewish people, that they'll see the truth.
Pastor, what is the United Nations vote about that's coming up shortly here in September?
It's being done at the request of the Palestinian Authority to establish a legal state in the area that the Palestinian Authority now controls, which is Gaza and the West Bank. It would give it legitimacy that any other nation in the world would have, and give it sovereignty, give it the right to make treaties, give it the right to legally transact between nations, and would make it with all of the rights and prerogatives that any sovereign nation has, which would complicate the relations that it now has with Israel.
How could it potentially complicate the relationship that it has with Israel if the Palestine became a sovereign state?
Well, if the land is divided the way they want it to go back to pre-1967 borders, it would make it very hard to defend that portion of their land that would be 9 to 15 miles at one point.
So it makes it almost indefensible.
Yes.
Which has significant implications for peace in the area.
Right.
So that which was supposed to be to establish peace actually is going to have potentially the reverse consequence.
Also would give the Palestinian state a right to make a peace treaty with another nation, or a defense pact with another nation, which would then put it on a footing that is entirely different in its dealings with Israel. It could even be a nation like Russia, or some other nation that might be willing to guarantee, the peace is depending on how you use
How you
that
define
term,
peace.
on how you define that peace, which would complicate things greatly.
Which nations would be very interested in and who are currently behind the Palestinians that are not necessarily for the Israelis? Which nations are behind the Palestinians other than the Arab nations?
Well, that's mainly Syria and Iran.
But other nations other than the
Other
Arab
than
nations who
If you're defining it Arab, you got Turkey,
well, yeah, other than
Muslim.
Uh-huh.
But Russia certainly has an interest. Several of the old Islamic nations that are on the southern part of the border with Russia have an interest in it.
Right.
There are
Kazakhstan.
And they're not necessarily positively
no
viewing Israel.
Cuba.
Cuba.
I know it seems kind of crazy. Venezuela. Any terrorist state would love to link up with the Palestinians because it's going to create massive problems for us, and they understand that.
And so our link to the Israelis would then be threatened, and our relationship with them and our interests in the Middle East would be threatened as a
Right.
result of that kind of a link. Okay, great. Thank you so much for watching today, and we hope that you will continue to pray for the UN resolution which is being voted on for the establishment of Palestine, and pray for the Jewish people and the Muslim people that God's perfect will be accomplished and that they will be able to establish the nation and see God's peace in both countries. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.